All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Bob Weathers from Your Vitality Project. And I'm here with my dear friend and our guest tonight, Michael Morar.
Hey, Bob.
Dr. To Be. Good to see you, Michael. Good to see you, Michael. Michael, you and I have been talking the last few weeks and the last few years about tonight's topic, and it's more freeform for us tonight, which is good. I don't know that it's ever not freeform, but I've completed the latest unit of posts, and for the next month and a half, going to be involved in some writing, but some other projects. And so, rather than being guided by today's post, we're gonna be guided by whatever's going on right now for us individually. We've been talking it nominally. The title I put for tonight's conversation is Reflecting on Acceptance, and we can go with that literally anywhere we want to, and I'm just fine with that. I want to share with you, Michael, as we start, a really kind comment that one of our viewers from another country said that he most appreciates yours and my dialogues every 2 weeks. And yeah, which felt really good. He says that he really gets the way we connect, and that made me very happy. I'm glad that comes through.
Yeah, I often think, Bob, of how serendipitously you and I met.
Yeah,
and
trippy.
And then when I think I emailed you or something, and then we just kind of ended up meeting for lunch. And
yeah,
I don't know, I felt almost like even in our first conversation, I'm thinking like, man, we don't have enough time, because I just felt like I was connecting with you on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. It's only ever been that way for me with you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been very aware this week of gratitude. I have, even through the day, gratitude for clients I work with and friends, and different opportunities to express gratitude, sometimes in text or emails. It feels really good in real time looking at you to experience.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about, I don't know, when you just said that you express gratitude to, some people that you work with, and I was just thinking about how, in the same way that our relationship's a reciprocal one, is that I think sometimes there's a misnomer, or that, and maybe because it does go this way sometimes, is that therapy is not some sort of circular thing, that it's only going one direction, is that I learn so much from the people I work with each week. And I think a lot of what's helped me with that, Bob, too, is the way you and I relate together, and so it helps, I think, to, I think a lot of things help with that, but I appreciate the way we're kind of just real with each other, and I carry that into other parts of my life.
Thank you. Yeah. I have so many thoughts and feelings as I'm listening to you. Fully agree with you. In fact, I think that's what my friend was commenting on. I just spoke to him last night. I think he senses that, and I think he also values that. So all the more so that tonality resonates for him, and it's this way of connecting. And I love what you just said in terms of how this can move out. Give me just a second, because it's a conversation I had yesterday in some context. I can't place it. We have so many conversations that it becomes part of the whole field. I'll share with you the essence of it, because it's an honoring thing to share. And it could have come up. I think it came up in a group. but which group and when, I can't tell you. There's several groups. I think yesterday I led 4 or 5 groups. So there's a lot of groups.
Wow.
Yeah, Tuesdays is a big day for me in terms of groups, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Somebody was talking in the group about their legacy and how it is that his view is that his legacy goes as far as his name is mentioned and remembered, like in his family lineage. And we talked about that, and I responded to that. It's beginning to come clear who it was. It was somebody new that I met for the first time. And I said, I thought about this a lot, and I really like what you're saying. And I said, I wonder if it's possible to imagine. I shared with them, my daughter Amanda has 2 kids, Owen and Emma, and they're 6 and 3 respectively. And I think it's quite possible that they'll remember me because we're close. And give a few more years for Emma, she'll register me. I remember my grandparents when I was Owen's age, and both my grandfathers died pretty close to my age when I was Owen's age. But I was thinking, what I was sharing is that it's quite likely that I won't know their kids. It's possible, but it's quite likely I won't. But I said I have every sense that the way that I impact my daughter and the way that my daughter impacts them, as well as whatever direct impact I have with Owen and Emma, that their kids will carry that. And I have very much a felt sense of that, is that we, as I've been influenced by people that have loved me and mentored me, they're here with you and me, Michael. And I suspect you have a similar experience. So we talked about that together, and it opened up the aperture even broader for this particular man. He said, I really like that, to think that even when my name is no longer mentioned, that the impact continues to ripple out. And then we opened it up even more broadly, and I just looked at him and I said, I've just met you today for the first time, and your presence with me, we're in a group, it's all on Zoom, but he's sitting there in a chair, and I said, your presence impacts me, and you impact where I go from here. And so it's not only deep in terms of lineage, but it's broad in terms of, and I didn't have to conjure that up. His freshness and his vulnerability, that's not a neutral thing. That's a beautiful, impactful thing. So that really opens up the conversation hugely. And so the way that you're talking about us and our clinical work, yours and my relationship, there's no way that the one doesn't impact the other and inform the other. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And what stands out to me about that, Bob, is the word meaning comes to mind, because it's ironic that the same client that I was thinking about earlier, when I said that I learned some things from her, and now another thing's coming into mind.
Yes.
And ironically, the same client I get frustrated with sometimes too.
Sure. It's all of it, right?
Yeah. And so is that she was talking about kind of just the struggle she was going through, and that it would really help if she knew that the struggle had meaning, and that it was going to be like that. It wasn't all for naught, Yeah. And when you're talking about that ripple, I think that it helps, at least the way I think about it, to then ascribe meaning to our interactions with other people, and then therefore to our life.
Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me, just in the last moment, it came to me. It's something that you and I talked about. We didn't talk about it, we wrote about it. Our texts and yesterday, last night. This dialogue that that's been going on through the posts at Vitality Project about, one position in our life is to kind of adopt and you and I've spoken about this any number of times, is to kind of adopt the position of I'm being done to, or have been done to. And I called it victim role or victim identity, just to give it a placeholder. But and every one of us, it's like you said with your client, this is the same client that you have these frustrations with. Every one of us knows every one of these positions. So one part of me is the victim role that identifies with that as an identity. And then there's another one that we've been talking about through our posts and our conversations, that is it possible to move into what I've kind of coming up with this hyphenated way of describing it, grief with acceptance. Is it possible to just relax into whatever comes and to grieve the suffering, grieve the disappointment? So not to not feel, but to grieve, to authentically grieve, and then at some point to move through that kind of a la Kubler-Ross, to accept.
Yeah.
And the thing that I wrote you last night or yesterday was the more recent development, which is recent means it was last Thursday, and I can plot it because it coagulated on Thursday for me. And at least for me, I've known of it abstractly, but I've never thought of it in terms of this sequence, because the sequence is Melanie Klein's sequence, moving from the paranoid schizoid position of victimization to the depressive position, which is really a place of being able to hold grief and accept. And I don't have a great term for this third one. I came up with a term, but it's not a great term. And it's like, what would it be like? And this is implied in what you just said. It's implied to me. What would it be like to embrace what comes? What would it be like to? And it's implied in what you're saying in terms of every relationship. It's ironic. Right before we met tonight, I was thinking of this very thing, Michael, and I'm not nearly evolved to live it, but I can imagine it, and that's pretty damn cool, because I haven't imagined it before now. I can imagine what would it be like to live every moment, every interaction, like what we're talking about with those people with whom we interact. Every one of them is an opportunity for this kind of presence. And that we're constantly, it would be like, in this way of understanding it, there'd be no way not to be a social activist, because every action has a moral quality. Am I showing up or not? No. Yeah. And what is the quality of my showing up, and those kinds of things. And it includes showing up, and you and I've talked a fair bit in our respective lives of suffering and disappointment, of pain, of loss. And what would it be like to actually turn towards that without just stoic disavowal of pain, but go like, this is really fucked up, and I really, really want to embrace this too, because this is what's given. This is what's given right now. And can I find a relationship to that doesn't hide it or fade it or fix it, and just be with that? And that can be a person, it can be a situation. Anyway, that's...
Yeah, no, when you said the third thing, and so I agree with everything you're like, 100%. I thought what the third thing was going to be, and I guess it could be, maybe it is in there. I haven't ever said this out loud, so let me see even if I can conjure it out. So like, I think in the text I said to you that I'm like, sometimes in varying stages of acceptance, right? And so whether we get into that place that you're talking about, which I think is beautiful, is because also I like what you said about imagining. I think that imagining things gets undervalued. I think that there's a ton of value in imagining things.
Thank you.
And so to even be, so I guess the other place I'm thinking about is acceptance, or realizing that I'm going to be in varying stages. It's like accepting that I'm not even always going to be in that place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like accepting not exactly getting there, or that I'm in and out of it. Yeah.
There's no getting out of it, or it's an infinite regress. I mean, however you look at it, it's like, no, I'm going to accept that, and then I'm going to accept that I can't accept that, and I'm going to like that. I'll tell you the traction point for me with this, Michael, because it's one that you know of well in my own life, and it's been a long time coming, and I do mean I love your affirmation of imagining, and I think I'm imagining into it, is that with my own loss of career in psychology, my loss of my professorship, ironically, at your alma mater, my loss of my license in psychology, all of that was just devastating, because I'd only ever felt really called to do that, much less felt so impassioned in my work. and owing to a whole series of in hindsight, really painful decisions, or whatever we want to call those, almost defaulting on decisions. I lost all of that. And what's gotten clearer and clearer to me, without getting all sunshine and rosy about it, is, and from this perspective, it's like that was absolutely necessary for me to get to this. And I've suffered it every step of the way. So it's not about not suffering it, but I'll tell you the point, and nobody that's listening to this will be from this particular scenario. I actually imagine sitting before the board of psychology and having this conversation, and I know that they're not listening to us right now. It's not the least bit disrespectful. It would be to say, I don't know how this is going to make sense to you guys, but I needed to make those mistakes in order for me to deepen to this level. And I in no way shirk responsibility in terms of making amends, whatever. I can't undo what I've done, but it's necessary for this. And to state that in the affirmative rather than in the defensive or the apologetic. It's like a different orientation. And it's the opposite of arrogance, because it's like, who would have signed on for this? It's been horrible. And I've grieved the not only the impact on my life, but on people that I've cared for, and even some people I don't care for. It's just like and it's like it's somehow embracing that. It's like, wow, embracing the illness that we are, that I am. Yeah. And not allowing that to define or defeat me, but it definitely informs. This is who I am. Is you and I have talked about this any number of times. It's like, who I am is inseparable from what I have done and gone through. Do I want to go back to something? It feels like that's against reality. The reality is this,
Yeah, I'm so glad too that you operationalized it. Meaning that gave examples. I was thinking, I asked you about reading a book on the shadow, and I was reading Bly, and I was just thinking because you and I do it really well, meaning that we can stay abstract for a long time. You usually bring us back with some real world stuff. And I don't just mean here, I just mean in our regular conversation, just that's where we go. And so Bly would have been glad to hear you. What does he say? Something about hairs in the baboon's ear or something like that.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yeah.
And I appreciate you describing the hairs in the baboon's ear.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly.
And so ironically, and I really feel for what you're saying, and maybe from a more selfish position than I would like to say, is that when you and I met that first time, and not the first time we met, that we had lunch. My concern at the time, and I don't know to what degree I've even shared this to you, is that a real connection point that I felt with you. I didn't know you had been through all that with the board and with the psychology board, and it was really fresh for you at the time, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And
so,
yeah.
I remember feeling the hairs on the back of my neck standing up because I connected with you so much on this, because my fear at the time, and it's not that it's not there still, because each time I apply for licensure, I come up against some of these same kind of things. And so I really connected with you on this one issue. Yeah. And I guess in this, I don't know if, and so I think in the same way that you're talking about, that you would like to tell the psychology board, having the experience that you had is in fact what's going to help you to do even a better job than you would have otherwise. Was the same thing that helped you and I connect then, and that doesn't get valued enough. They're only seeing the evil in the shadow, not the broader spectrum of good things that exists in the shadow.
Yeah, I think thank you, Michael. I think it's really possible to make mistakes at the level I have and not learn anything and just kind of perpetuate them. And I made some serious mistakes, and I actually repeated some of those mistakes. As one supervisor said, Bob, lightning hit you twice, and Yeah, it's like that never happened, but you got hit twice. And she wasn't absolving me of responsibility. I'm not absolving me of responsibility. Makes me think, as I listen to you, of the distinction between retributive justice, which is so much the world we live inside of, the world to which I've been subject, including within myself, where we retribution for wrongs done, punishment, and so on. And there's some place for that in the psyche. I don't want to exclude anything, but what of restorative justice? And I don't think restorative justice means cheap grace. It's not just handing out to people on the street corner. It's like if one works, I like what one author calls costly grace. It's costly grace. It costs you next to everything. It costs you everything. It costs you everything. And it's still grace. And it's still grace. It's still grace. And so restorative justice, as I understand it, would restore to the community those of us that have made grievous errors. And all of us make errors on a continuum. I just amped out on one extreme, as I have in many ways in my life, good and bad. And I'm very interested in restoration. I've come to accept that I won't be restored to that particular guild, and that's sorrowful to me. But my work continues, and what I'm sharing with you feels like the truth, and it's a truth that I would speak humbly. I read recently, I'm reading a philosopher who talks about ontological humility. I mean, like at the deepest level, humility. It would be out of that place, ideally. It would be to speak out of that place, and it would require ears to hear. And I don't assume that, but I want to bring this message to everybody I touch, as with you, everybody you touch. You bring your truth, and that goes unstinted, and that I can embrace. And I've written so much, and we've talked so much about shame. This would be really not the antidote to shame. This is like the transformation of shame. This is like the transformation of shame into alchemical gold, and that's only stated humbly. That's acknowledging the fallibility, But it's. That I don't want to reverse. I don't have a retro romanticism that wants to take me back to the garden before all this happened. It's happened, and now can we transform what happened into gold? And I think that's happening, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, I think that restorative justice is what my client was talking about. That through this, she would at least like to know that her suffering then yields something in the end, because the worst is when it's just punishment, so to speak, or what was it that you called it? Not restorative, but
retribution or retributive justice.
Yeah. Because I mean, unfortunately, that's what a lot of our culture operates under, and it's just I'm surprised when I think of this. I'm still surprised that we know that is not good for that person, nor for the broader. And so it blows my mind that we continue to operate under those assumptions, knowing that it doesn't work. Like, it just blows my mind. Like it's
kind of like the war on drugs. I don't know how much data you need to have to know that that's not really an effective metaphor, but we continue the war on drugs. Yeah. My own therapist all these years, Don, this is a more recent development for him, and he shared it with me in conversation. He talks about retributive justice in terms of an eye for an eye. Really, it's rooted, for example, in the Hebrew tradition. They call it the Talion response, and Talion is a mythological reference to eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. And Don's reference, which I like, and as far as I know, I've never heard anybody else say it. He says we need to move to a different metaphor, and he says it's eye to eye, eye to eye. It's eye to eye, not eye for an eye, and that really captures it. That really captures it. Eye to eye. Is there a way that we can?
Yeah. And back to what you were saying about what was it you said? But it was about kind of like making mistakes, and you can't exactly go back and ever to that. And I guess I've thought about this a good bit, is around having made some significant mistakes that were turning points in my life. I remember going, boy, I really fucked up.
Yeah.
It's going to take me 5 years to get back on course. So I had that exact thought, something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Me
I
too.
still
Me
think
too.
about it in terms of, I'll never, like, there's no parallel, like there's no exact course,
Yeah.
you know? And so I'm not exactly correcting the way I thought about it then, but depending on how you look at it, that could have been greater than 5 years or more than 5, you know, like it's never going to be on that same path. It's a whole different path from there. It might have made a whole bunch of things possible that never would have otherwise. At the same time, if you look at it, you know, like maybe financially, I might still be making, you know, so if you just look at it that way, just having been in school for the last 5 years, you know, that I'm still not back, you know, and it may be 10 years till I get back to that level.
There's a poem that comes to mind with what you just said, and it's floating around. Let's see if I love this poem, and I remember encountering it right when I had lost everything. It's kind of like reading Robert Bly, you know, having read him. I read him long before I really tasted the shadow. It's like that was like a you know, like a prophetic invitation. This is your future, Bob. The poem is by Rumi. For those who don't know, 13th century Persian poet, and it applies here to what you just said about, gosh, it's going to take me 5 years to get back on course, and goodness gracious, can I relate to that? I think that fantasy stayed with me right up through the time I met you. I met you in 2016 or close to it. And it was in May of 2016 that I met with the board after the better part of a decade of going through rehabilitation of very much in this kind of retributive model with some kind of veneer of restorative. But when push came to shove, it was really full on retributive. It was very adversarial, and so be it, so be it. But I remember coming across right when I lost my license and all of this came crashing down. I came across this poem. Rumi says, the way of love is not subtle argument. The door there is devastation. Birds make great sky circles of their freedom. How do they learn it? They fall, and falling, they're given wings.
That's great.
Yeah, it is a great poem. It took me a better part of 10 or 15 years to begin to live into understanding, I think, what Rumi was getting at. But this idea that in 5 years I'll get my life back on course, it's not that way. There's devastation, and I couldn't have borne it. I needed to have this kind of hope that was a solace. You know, it was like I kind of kept me glued together. And then at some point you get to a place where maybe you have just enough within and between to endure the devastation and then just let go into the falling. And there's various ways you've done that and various ways I've done that. And it will continue right up to death, I presume. But that image of that's how we learn how to fly, is falling. And there's not a 5-year plan here. There's no rescue, at least on the terms that I had. I have to say there's complete redemption, but it's not in any way I expected. It's like it's certainly not what I expected.
Yeah. Well, I think also that, and maybe this was implicit in what you said, but I was thinking too in terms of the birds, is that they appreciate when you're falling, that you can then appreciate flight much more than you could before you began to fall.
That's right? Beautiful. That's beautiful. I like that a lot. I think it's implied in what we started with today. We're going to wind down in just a minute, but this way of relating to others, whether it's your client, my client, our clients, our friends, our people in our lives, it's like that experience of falling has led me to feel much more connected to you, Michael, and to so many people in my life, ideally to all people in my life. It reminds me of Mother Teresa when she was interviewed about her work in Calcutta, working with people that had leprosy and were so disfigured. And she said that she looked into their eyes and she says she saw the eyes of Jesus in every single one of their eyes. And I think that whatever that was about, that's an incredible thing. But to be able to see, I can't even say it's a crying, just.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to be able to see with compassion. And I think the falling has, at least for me, and I'm assuming for you too, the falling has deepened my compassion beyond anything that's possible. That's what I would want to relay to the board, regardless of their disposition, is that look at what's been carved out by this experience, and don't turn away too quickly, because there's something that's happened here that's
it's of value. That's of value and meaningful.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of this last quote too, Bob, and maybe I'll pull it up real quick, and then because it's very much in the spirit of what you just said around how your let me just pull it up real quick, and I'll just. Because it has to do with what you said about Mother Teresa in terms of she was seeing Jesus in other people's eyes, which is, I think, that people know how we see them.
Yes, they do.
And so this is maybe a bit dry or something compared to, the way you described that with Mother Teresa seeing Jesus in each one of their eyes. But it's, if you treat an individual as he is, he will remain how he is. But if you treat him as if he or what he ought to be and could be, he'll become what he ought to be and could be.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's it. That's it right there. I think there's value. It doesn't feel dry at all to me. It's really, it's. And you know what it's like to have somebody see you and not reduce you down, but actually release you up. I mean, that's an incredible gift.
Yeah. And that's exactly what Mother Teresa, I don't even know if that was her intention exactly, but I'm guessing that was the effect was that then seeing people into existence in a different kind of way.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, happy Thanksgiving, Michael. I'm very, very thankful for you and for our friendship.
I feel very, too, Bob.
Thank you. I feel very, very deeply seen and only ever have by you, and it's such a gift to me. And I can guarantee you that it radiates out.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, same here, Bob. I appreciate all of our conversations and this one, and they all just build upon each other.
Yeah, more to come, my friend.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay. Lots of love to you, brother. Take care. Good night, Michael.
Bye-bye. Good night.